We all know that the right habits and mindsets can be transformational in how we live our lives. But among the sea of advice online, it can be challenging to know who to trust with these important life decisions. At The Standard, we answer those questions and introduce you to some of the most successful people in the world in their fields and the habits and the mindsets they use to achieve their success. To learn more about our social platform, head on over to www.thestandardapp.com. And now, your host, myself, Chris Pallatroni. Well, welcome to another episode of The Standard. Today we have a phenomenal guest, based out of the Netherlands, but originally from Greece. Vassia Sarantopoulou has been the head psychologist and CEO and founder of the AntiLoneliness Academy, which is a company offering mental health services based in the Netherlands, but servicing people worldwide. Their mission is to break the taboo on loneliness. She is also the founder of Mental Health Academy, which provides online courses that help with mindset shifts on topics such as negative thinking, fears, boundaries, and a more balanced life. But in all reality, she has been helping people for the vast majority of her adult life. She is a licensed psychologist, trained in Schema therapy and emotionally focused therapy for couples therapy approach. She has 2 masters in science, in counseling and psychology, and she drops words of wisdom and inspiration through her well-known Instagram, YouTube, online courses, and collaboration with universities, companies, and organizations. Among many things, Vassia is a trainer. She is a perfectionism expert. She is a relationship counselor and a mental health ambassador. Her expertise, you will find, is quite extensive, covering topics such as loneliness, divorce, relationship conflicts, grief, anxiety, depression, trauma, perfectionism, fear of failure, rejection, boundaries, procrastination, burnout, and so much more. As you'll hear in this episode, she is an advocate for inner peace, compassion, kindness, mental strength, healthy relationships, both with yourself and with others, and removing the stigma around mental health and abundance. Her broad message, above all else, is that you are not alone. I could not be more thrilled to bring you this guest today. So here we go with Vassia Sarantopoulou. Hi, Vassia. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. How is your day going?
Good. I just came back from my car checkup and trying to understand what is supposed to happen because I have some things that I need to change in the car and maintenance, etc. So, these kind of talks that I'm not used to do, but then I did it.
Oh my God. I can't wait for the day where we just don't need cars at all and we can just somehow, like, I don't know, like I'm old enough to remember the Jetsons, which is like a cartoon from way back in the day. And it sort of promised this fictional future of just cars appearing at your house and taking you where you needed to go, but you didn't really own them. It was just sort of like, I guess, like Tesla, but like some independent ride company. And I hate cars and I hate the maintenance of them. So I feel your pain.
I'm looking forward to the day that we could not need the cars because we would teleport.
Oh my God. Yeah. My son has dreams of like developing that. And I'm like, you're going to have to get really good at science and quantum mechanics and all this stuff. And I was like, but my Lord, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Then we could do this in person. We could just beam ourselves to a studio.
Just give me 5 minutes. I'm there.
Oh my God. Maybe not even that, right? Just grab a cup of coffee and boom.
Yeah.
Well, I could not be more excited to chat with you today. You and I obviously met probably about a year ago, somewhere in that range. I think very highly of your work. You cover so many important topics, but I would love to, maybe before we dive into like your specific habits and mindsets, I'd love to understand like why you do this. Like, why did you build this academy? Why have you spent like the better part of your adult life trying to help people?
Well, that's a good question. I have done an exercise when I was listening to Dean Graziosi. I don't know if you know him. Have you heard of him? No? He's working with Tony Robbins now. So I heard one of his talks, webinars, I don't remember what. So he was talking about an exercise 7 levels deep. So you just ask yourself 7 times why, for something that you are doing in your life. Why am I doing this? And then you get an answer. I'm doing this because of that. Then why is that important that I do that? Then you give another answer. It's important because then why it's that important? So you ask yourself based on the answer before 7 times. So I did this exercise, and what I understood, what I realized was that during my growing years, childhood, adolescence, I have multiple encounters with people who were really mean to me. And I'm talking about bullying, teachers who were not supposed to be teachers, considering the way that they were behaving to the students. Also, family members that we were completely disconnected, completely invalidating the needs of their children, me as well. So I had so many encounters with people who were not kind. So what I'm thinking now is that if they could take care of their mental health, they would actually be kinder people.
Yeah.
So then we could actually be part of a kinder humanity if we could just have better mental health or be more aware. Sometimes it's not like being a guru or Dalai Lama or whatever. Just be
Mhm.
aware of our needs, our feelings, our thoughts. We would be kinder people to each other. And I think that's my main vision.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I share a very similar stance. I think I come at it from a slightly different angle. But that last part that you said is if people could take better care of themselves from a mental health perspective, and I sort of like lump into that wellness because although I think they're highly interconnected, there are some differences between purely mental health and wellness. And I even think I have it as like a quote, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm just such a believer that, and I'd love your perspective on it, that like when you do the really deep work of trying to be your best, which is like, look, there's no final destination of that. It is a continual journey. There's ebbs and flows. It is a step forward and God, maybe 3 or 4 steps back sometimes. But if you are attempting in whichever way you need to be your best, the way that I think about it is that you will sort of have a certain level of compassion for yourself and just how hard it is to
Yeah.
be a human sometimes.
Yeah.
We are emotional creatures living this life. And I think if you can do that inner work, I think it helps you develop a certain level of like empathy that can extend to a fellow human, even if you don't know them, even if you may not agree with them in a variety of ways. And so I honestly just believe like the change we seek, a more loving and just humanity. I just use the words like nudge humanity in a more loving and kind direction. The best way to get there is just by taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. We can be more forgiving to ourselves and to each other. We're not going to be so strict, so tough. We are used to tough love now, but that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah. As I was saying, like, yeah, I just believe so much that the way to make the world a kinder, more loving place is not by focusing on other people. It truly is by focusing on yourself. And I actually think there's such a uniqueness in that approach too, because I think in some ways we get the luxury of being incredibly selfish. I tell my wife all the time, like, you should be like ridiculously selfish because you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give me
Yeah.
your best version or our children our best version or your following or your coworkers or anybody else. And so I think there's some like it's pretty beautiful to be able to say like focusing on myself is literally what makes people the better version of themselves and what makes the world better. So completely agree with you on that. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing a little bit of that. What I follow so much of your work and I know mindsets are so important to what you do. But I guess like more broadly speaking, like when you think of like habits and mindsets, which there are some differences between the two, like how important are those to you specifically? Not to you in teaching your clients or the courses you run, but just for you yourself. Like, how important are mindsets and habits?
For me, habits and mindset are the pillars of my life and the values of my life. For me, a habit doesn't say anything if it's not connected to a value. And I can give you an example. If you have the habit of working out, it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't belong under an umbrella, the umbrella of health, the umbrella of balance, the umbrella of well-being. It needs to be connected with something else. Or another habit, having breakfast every morning with your partner. That habit has no meaning if it doesn't belong to a general mindset and value that you have of connection or relationships or love. So we need first to find what's important to us. That's the value. Why is that important? And then when we find the why, then the habits will come because we are doing something mindfully and now and being aware every day of our lives. So it's a system,
Yeah.
values, habits, and mindset. So the value is the why, and of course, if we don't know the why, the habit will not work. How many people you know that they started diet on Monday, but then on Tuesday they were done? We don't know the why, the habit will not work. I many times, sometimes I say that, I have to start waking up earlier. If I don't know my why, I will not do it. The moment that my alarm will start working, then I will be like, yeah, you know what? It's not that important that I wake up earlier. Why should I do it? And then snooze. So we need to find the why, and then the mindset is what sustains the habit, because the habit will have its ups and downs.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, we will need some time in order to figure out how to do that habit properly and fitting into our schedule. And especially the difficult times, you need the mindset in order to sustain the habit. You want to work out, but then it's raining outside. You need the mindset that says this is important for you, or it doesn't matter if you do it, in a very messy way. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just go out, just do a walk, or just do something instead of doing nothing. So we need the mindset to sustain the habit.
Yeah, and all the research I've done on, and all slightly different perspective, but like on identity change, like trying to become
Mm,
the person we want to become, it always starts with clarity.
yeah.
And clarity is another way of sort of saying, like, what are those values that you have? What is the why behind what you're doing? Because if you don't know where you're trying to go, it's very hard to put in the correct mindsets and habits that will get you to that destination. I'm curious with all the, I'll just broadly say coaching. I know, it's more than just coaching of what you do, but I'll just broadly say, like, when you're sharing information with people or you're working with clients directly, is that where you start with them as well? I mean, once you get through like the issue that they're personally faced with, is it essentially you trying to help them recalibrate or figure out what that why is? Is that where you're essentially trying to go with people? And then from
Yeah.
there, build off of that?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's important. That's not so like linear, as you said. First, we figure out what's the problem, and then we work on the habits. I think it's very integrated,
Yeah.
because when I'm trying to understand what my client's life look like, and that means their habits and their mindset and their relationships, figuring out what the habits are that they're having now is for me a reflection of how they see themselves,
Yeah.
which is already a wealth of information for me. It's a reflection of their past traumas. It's a reflection of how other people treated them. It's a reflection of how they see themselves. So this says a lot of information. It gives me a lot of information. Like if somebody says, well, I just sit on the couch all day and I watch TV, and then we start going into this habit and why this is happening, and what do you think about yourself and how do you feel there? And then you bring into the surface something like, well, I don't expect anything more from me, or other people don't expect anything from me because I have always been a disappointment. There you have it. From just one habit, you see how this reflects on how they see themselves or how they think others see them.
Yeah, words are really powerful. And I think when I first started coaching people, I didn't recognize like how powerful the words people choose to
Yeah.
use
Yeah,
really give you such tremendous insight into like their thought process. And in some ways,
exactly.
like they're not fully aware of that as well. I think now in like working with some of my clients, like I'm very interested in like their habits and whatnot, because I don't know, whether you're aware of it or not, like 90+% of what we do is very habitual. And so even if you're not fully aware of your bad habits or your good habits, if I can get a glimpse into the way you live your life, your days, your weeks, your months, to your point, it gives you a very profound insight as to like the way they see themselves. Even if they can't articulate exactly
Yeah,
the way they're feeling, you can start to like see the patterns of like interesting, how they
exactly.
maybe not put themselves first, or they neglect certain things that will be very beneficial. So yeah.
Yeah. And this is what changes when they start forming healthy habits. It's the point when they start loving themselves, they start accepting themselves, they start taking care of themselves. So that's the turning point.
Yeah. All right. So I'm so curious. Like, I on this podcast we talk to a lot of coaches, and they range quite heavily from habit coaches to therapists to psychologists, and like obviously all of this stuff, at least the way that I look at it, although there are tremendous nuances within each of these, it's an ecosystem. And
Mm.
there's a lot of sort of best practices that will be somewhat universal, although maybe a little bit of a different path to get to there. You have so much knowledge. I mean, there's so many things that you talk about, and there's so much education that you have. I'm so curious, what is your best habit? Like, with all of this knowledge you have at your fingertips and all this coaching you do, what would you say is like the habit that contributes the most to your success or your well-being?
I'm going to say something funny first. When we met last year and you introduced me to your ideas about habits and talking about habits and inspiring other people through my habits, I felt, oh my God, I have no habits. Oh my God, what am I going to say here? I don't know. So I was at a loss. But actually, it's what you said before. I was not aware of the many unconscious habits that I'm using every day. So then when I'm sitting down and I'm starting to work on the habits and creating all these videos for the standard, then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I have a lot of habits. Oh, wow. What about this? What about that? And as I was preparing for our interview, and you asked me, like, just pick one and talk about the most important. I thought, oh my God, now that's so difficult. What's the most important? Because all of them are important. So you make my life difficult.
Oh no, oh no.
No, no, joking. So I chose one.
All right.
I think the one that has supported my mental health the most is setting a self boundary on how many hours I'm going to work and when I'm going to stop. Being a perfectionist, being an entrepreneur, usually this boundary is very blurry. And I can go on for hours. I can be like, yeah, I can push another hour. I can push another hour. And if somebody doesn't stop me, then I would be working, working, working until I crash. So setting this boundary for myself, saying it's dinner time, that's it. Stop. You have to stop. It was for me something that helped me in order to maintain a healthy brain, because actually it's about brain. The more you use your brain, the sooner it will collapse. It's a machine. It doesn't work eternally, nonstop. So I learned how to take this break, because that's part of the productivity as well. When you stop work and you do other stuff unrelated with work, you're actually taking care of your brain so that next day you will still have energy power. So in order for this to happen, I needed to work with the feelings that were coming with this boundary, because you have this panic feeling. Oh my God, I haven't finished all the things that I wanted to finish. I cannot end the day now. No, it's important. So this urgency that was coming at the end of the day, oh my God, I have another one. I have another one. That was for me something that I learned. And I can give you an example. I remember that I was saying to myself every day, at the end of the day, you have to go out and make a walk, go in the park, and relax a little bit. So I remember that I had to do something very important. But then I said, okay, go for the walk because you promised to yourself that you're going to do it. And when you come back, you can continue. So I went for a walk. And as I was walking there, something shifted. And then I said, wait a minute. That was not important, that important that I need to finish it today. I can finish it tomorrow. So you see how our mind changes when we just take a break. Before the walk, I was just, this is the end of the world. It has to finish now. Otherwise, there will be a total disaster. And then I just give my brain a break. And then I realize the reality, which is, yeah, nobody will ask you for that. It's you that you're setting this standard. You can leave it for tomorrow. So it helped me a lot into reframing what is important, what is not, what is urgent, what is not. It helped me a lot recharge my brain, absolutely. It helped me remember that there are other things that are also important. Relationships, nature, rest, fun, laugh, all these things that are important, especially if you're in your entrepreneurial bubble. You think that the only thing that I have to do is impact the world or make a change or whatever. But then you figure out that, wait a minute, there are other things that are also important. And of course, it helped me keep the balance.
Yeah, I feel like you're talking to me here. So I have so many questions on you because I clearly, as an entrepreneur, it may be overgeneralization. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way, right? It's, we're working on our own brands, and for those of us that are doing something that may have a slightly wider reach, I do think there's this burden we put on our shoulders as if like we're the ones that are going to change the world. And it's like, if we don't work, God, there's so much less goodness we're spreading. There's a couple things. One, it sounds like you've chosen very specific things to incorporate into your day, the walk in nature, the relationships and stuff. And I think that stuff is incredibly important. But my question is this, like, if you plan those things in your day, in your week, and you say, these are all the other things that I need to make sure that I'm not losing sight of. They're very important, whatever those are for you. For you, maybe it's some exercise and some friends and, dinner and all that good stuff. But if you get those things and you don't ever miss out on them, you always make sure that they're getting done. Is it okay for you to go back to work? I know you're setting this boundary, and I don't know how rigid that boundary is. If it's like, I shut off at 5 and I will only pick up the next day at such and such time. But if you're getting all those other things done and you find yourself with some free time, is it okay to go back to work? And I guess that's in conjunction with, like, do you know how much time your brain actually needs to rest? Like, have you perfected that?
I'm going to talk about my case. So for me, it's something like when you see it, you cannot unsee it. When you see that there are other things that also matter, it's not that strong of a magnet, the work thing. It doesn't pull me every time I have some free time. I would love to have this free time, to be honest, but it doesn't pull me back to work. Maybe it can, my mind can go into different directions, like let's do some gardening, let's do this, let's do that. So it's not that strong. But also, if sometimes I break the rule and I work more, it's okay. You can allow some exception to happen. It's fine, because the big picture says that, okay, you've put your ducks in a row. It's okay. If one day you can go back to work, if one day you don't work 8 hours, but you work 12, of course, things like that will happen. But as long as the big picture stays under this balance, it's fine, of course.
And when you say that balance, though, and I'm just thinking of all these people I interact with who, a lot of my circle of friends and colleagues are, I don't want to say workaholics, but we love what we do. Let's put it that way. There's another way, a gentler way of saying it. And I often find that we're filling our free time with more work. It's, if we have time on the weekend and, our kids are not around, it's, well, let me go back and finish this course, this PowerPoint, this whatever. And I guess what I'm hearing you say for yourself is that it's okay to do that from time to time, provided you're not neglecting all the other things that are important. And so it sounds like you have a fair amount of I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but just recognizing that like maybe your boundary is not a hard line. There's a little bit of grayness in that. Is that how
Yeah.
you look at it, or?
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's not a reactive boundary, it's a proactive boundary. So it's not a boundary that I set because I'm tired. It's a boundary that I set so that I will not get tired. So when I have a free weekend and I have done all my social interactions and all my free time, hobbies, activities, and work, and I have a weekend, yeah, sure, I can go back and work if I want. But at the same time, I'm thinking, do you remember the times that you were working on Sunday or both days of the weekend,
Yeah.
and then the week ahead was so tiring and so dragging, and you were hoping that you have used these days back then and the weekend for rest?
Yeah.
So it's a system that I sustain in order not to get tired, in order to have the energy for the future, not because I'm tired and now I need to rest. It's more on the proactive spectrum.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm a runner, and I always use the analogy of like your forever pace. It's the pace where you're not sprinting and you're going to get too winded. You might be running, I don't know, slower than you could, but you're running at a pace that you can go in forever.
Yeah.
And I do think all those things are important. I'm curious, like with this particular like habit that you have, do you find yourself like what happens when you don't adhere to it?
Mm.
Like when you have this boundary for whatever reason, you find yourself working more than you want to. Maybe it's that weekend you work, you get back like what happens in those moments? Like is it just a learning moment for you, and or
Yeah.
how do you sort of recalibrate your approach to this habit if you don't stick to it?
With a lot of compassion and acceptance. So I'm not going to be very harsh on myself. Look what you did. You knew it and then you made a mistake. Again, you fell back into the old patterns again. So I'm not going to be that harsh on myself. I would be, okay, we misjudged the situation, or maybe we thought that we could manage, but then we did it again. And I'm talking about the cases where I worked more and then I paid the price for that. So then what I would do, I would be more compassionate with myself. Okay, we learned the lesson and then we will take care of that next time so that we will not repeat that. If I break the rule, and that's the exception, that I will work more, for example, I will make sure to compensate for that. So I will say to myself, okay, you work 2 days in a row, all night or whatever, you worked more than you could. So now let's find a day that you will take an extra day off, or let's do something in the weekend that will give you total rest and you will not think about work. You will not do anything related to work, so that we can compensate and yeah, repair the damage that has happened. So focusing again more on the how to repair rather than punishing myself for that.
I feel like the compassion piece of that is really important. And I have to imagine, not just for yourself, but in the work you do with all of your clients, it's a really hard thing for people to do, is have sort of self-compassion for a relapse in whatever habit or mindset that they're trying to maintain. How do you go about that? Is that just like a moment of pause, or like I don't know how your brain works, but I have to imagine there's, at least like the way that I think about it for myself, is like there's this like, I don't know. I think there's like maybe like a societal tendency to just be like, no, you can push through, like do it, like be stronger, be stronger. But I totally recognize like the value in just being like, hey, we're not perfect. Like we're
Yeah.
imperfectly perfect.
Yeah.
So how does your self compassion like kick in? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, especially if we have been raised with this tough love and this hustle mentality that we have to push, 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 and work more. Definitely, it's very difficult to invent this compassionate voice, but it's possible. So when I'm struggling with finding that, I always try to imagine how I would talk to a child or to my child. Would I say to my child, oh, look what you did here. You messed it up again. How many times do I need to tell you that this is not this way, it's that way? Ah, you disappointed me again. Would I say something like that? No, I wouldn't. What would I say if they had done this mistake of working more than they should? I would have said something, wow, you must be very exhausted. You're tired, right? And you're feeling bad because you knew it, but then you do it. Don't feel bad. This happens to everybody. I have done it many times, and I'm sure other people have done it because we're humans and we miscalculate and we think that we're stronger than we are. I get it. So trying to figure this compassionate voice is trying to imagine how you would talk to your child.
Yeah, I think that's great.
In 2023, not in 1960. In 2023.
No, that's good. No, that's awesome. I guess the last couple questions just on this is like, when it comes to setting boundaries, like, what are like some of the tactical things that you do? Is it, I don't know, like turning your computer all the way off so it's harder to restart it? Is it killing notifications? Is it like, what do you do to actually like adhere to the boundary that you've set? Like, what does that, like, I guess, like mechanically look like? Like you've got this boundary,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's like a 5 o'clock deactivate or whatever, but what's that actually look like for you?
Yeah. One of my proudest moments was when I deleted notifications in my phone, specifically the email notifications. That was the moment that I'm so proud that I did. Because again, we miscalculate and we think that we are stronger than we are. So I thought, yeah, okay, if I read some emails in the evening, what's the problem? And there were many, many nights that I would have read something very disturbing and then I couldn't sleep. So then I figured out, why am I doing that to myself? No, 5 a.m. or all day long, no emails. If I'm in front of my computer, I can see my emails. If I'm not in front of my computer, I don't need to see the emails because probably it's life, the personal life territory and not the work territory. So one of the things that I did, I just deleted email notifications from my phone. That was a very strong boundary that I set.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I've actually taken a very similar approach too. So I have a hard boundary at 5 o'clock to leave my office. So family time, dinner, chores, all that good stuff. And I've removed every notification off of my phone. So no Instagram notifications, no LinkedIn, no email, no, I don't know, sports notifications. Like there is no notification because I feel like in a lot of ways it's like Pavlov's law. You hear a ding and I'm like a dog like running to my phone. I'm like, I can't be like that. That can't be my life. And so there are some disadvantages to it, but I think there's more positives that come of that as I'm not, or maybe even just turn your phone on to like focus mode or something like that. But I recognize like being tied to my phone gives me access to everything. So one of my boundaries is just putting the phone down and just not responding to it, like period.
Yeah,
Like if it's out of sight,
yeah,
it's sort of out of mind. And that sort of like helps me stick to the boundary.
exactly. Another thing that I'm doing is I am planning rest and time in nature and time with friends.
Yeah.
So every Sunday I plan the meals of the week. I don't prepare them, but I just plan. What is it? Because the less decisions we're making, the better we work. So I do that on Sunday. But also what we do also with my partner is that we plan how are we going to rest during this week? Because it can be very easy that we just sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and without understanding, the whole week is gone. And the only thing we have done is work and Netflix. It's very easy. So we proactively say, okay, in order to avoid that, what are the two things? Let's say two. Let's not be over optimistic. That we can do on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday before the weekend or after the weekend, so that we can change a little bit the routine of the day, so that it's not only work and Netflix, but something else. So we will plan a walk in the park or a walk in the lake that we have next to us, or we will plan drinks or dinner out or friends meeting, something like that. But we need to proactively plan and make space for that. Otherwise, we will forget it.
Oh my God, we could do an entire podcast on weekly planning. I am constantly trying to push planning on people because if you don't plan your week, weeks morph into months, and months into quarters, and quarters into years. And next thing you know, a decade of your life is gone. And it's like you haven't intentionally chosen, going back to like the clarity part of like, what is it that you want to accomplish that will make this week great, or so forth, even if it's just time with friends and family and picking up a hobby or something. So I'm very, I mean, anybody that knows me, I'm like, weekly planning. We gotta talk about that. That's phenomenal. Okay. So let's shift from habits to a mindset. And I recognize with these questions, like, there's so many good habits we have, and there's so many good mindsets we have. So I recognize it might be difficult to just choose one. But when you think of like the most powerful mindset that you have that really supports your mental health and your success, what is it?
So you know already that I work a lot with perfectionism and perfectionists, and trying to recover from this mindset. I am a recovering perfectionist as well. I think recovered, I can start saying recovered. But anyway, that's the mindset for me that's the most important. Not the perfectionistic mindset that says, you're not good enough, you're not successful enough, you're not smart enough. Because that mindset is the one that makes you run on the treadmill for forever, just a hamster wheel, running, don't go anywhere. But the opposite mindset, which says, you are already enough. And the first time that I heard it by somebody else, it was from my therapist a couple of years ago, where we were talking about whether I consider myself successful, whether I consider myself good enough. And then she said the words, Vassia, you are already successful. What? Wait a minute. What? What? Yes, you are already successful. Because in my mind, perfectionistic mind, was that you still have a lot of work in order to become successful. But then that's a bar that always changes. And then the moment you reach a goal, the bar changes, you have to reach another one, and you have to reach another one in order to be considered successful by yourself, first and foremost. So when she said, you are already successful, she was not talking from a social or from an entrepreneurial perspective, but she was talking from a personal perspective that says, you have done already enough things in your career, but also as a person in your personal life. So you are already successful. So that phrase stuck with me. Like, what? You think so? I'm already? Oh yeah. I can say that to myself. I'm already successful. And again, not in a monetary, financial, or whatever company perspective. So then I learned how to look back and recognize myself for what I have achieved so far. Personal or professional perspective. I learned how to look back and be proud for what I have achieved so far. It doesn't mean that I need to stop now because I've done enough and that's it. I completed the circle of, success, or the trajectory of success. But to introduce these pauses where I stop and say, hey, you're doing okay already. You don't need to run. You can walk. You're doing okay. It removes the color of panic from my palette, which is a feeling of a perfectionist. We're always in panic. I haven't done enough. I need to do more. So it removes that color. You don't need the panic anymore. You're doing okay. Hey, take a breath. Fine. Whoo. Okay. Rest. So that was for me one of the most important moments of changing my mindset. And I learned to cultivate that through gratitude journaling, like not only what I see and I thank myself today, but generally, again, looking back, looking not only at the professional steps, but also the personal steps, the relational achievements, looking at the people that I meet, other people, look at the people that you have talked to. Be grateful. Oh my God, my life is so rich because I met Chris, Nadine, and Claire, and Julie, and all these people. Wow. So that's something that helps boosts this healthy mindset.
So would you say that this mindset is your identity at this point? Like, in other words, are you on the spectrum of, I really believe this, versus like, I have to keep reminding myself this, like, is this your identity at this point? Because I have to imagine, I mean, I struggle with this. I remember the car ride home when I sold my first company that I'd worked so hard to do. And I'm like, is now the moment? Like, is it right now? Is now the moment of success? And I was like, man, I don't feel any different. Like, and it's like, but I set out and I accomplished what I said I was going to accomplish. Like, I have more money. And I was like, I don't feel very different at the moment. And so I struggle with this. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when I listen to podcasts, even of very, very successful people, I don't know. I think we wonder, like, was it a one-hit wonder? Like, is the rent due every single day on our success? So for you specifically, like, is this your identity at this point, or is this something that you're continually working on to maintain this powerful mindset?
I think that will be something that I will do for the rest of my life. And the reason is because me and you, we are entrepreneurs. And that means that we are constantly stepping out of our comfort zones. Stepping out of your comfort zone means that fear comes in. You start getting scared. Oh, what am I going to do here? Or people know that I know about this, or I'm going to be a fraud, or I'm going to be exposed. All these new steps include fear, and fear means inner critic. So every time I try something new, I have this inner voice that says, you're not enough, you're not enough. What are you doing? This is going to fail. This is another mistake. Look what you did. Oh. So every time we step out of our comfort zone, inner critic will be there, which means that's why I said that we will always feel that, because we will always be entrepreneurs, not only as a professional identity, but also as a personal identity. We always want to experiment and create and expand. So for me, knowing that there's these two voices, the balanced and the critical voice, the perfectionist and the healthy perfectionist, it's, for me, the work that I do is make sure that I water the correct plant. These are two plants. Mm-hmm. If I water the critic, then I will hear more of these critical thoughts in my head. And when I achieve something, I will feel exactly what you said, nothing. I don't feel anything. I achieved it. It was a dream of mine, but then I don't feel anything. If I water the other plant, the plant of being balanced and being grateful for what I've achieved, then this is what I will feel more and more. They will both exist in my head, but I need to mindfully and consciously water the plant that will make me feel more happy, satisfied, and rest.
Yeah. There is so much power in that statement, because we could have an entire conversation on like the neuroscience of like, we are what we think. And I mean, I've done some research on this. I'm no expert by any stretch. And just the fact of the matter is we have very repetitive thoughts. The vast majority of the thoughts that we have are fairly negative. That's just sort of like the innate qualities of the human brain, if you will, that they're negative, they're repetitive. And there is a lot of science that supports that, like, we are what we think. And also, like, the way we think has physiological responses in our body. And so whether you can like fully wrap your brain around that as a listener, I think if you can take sort of the leap of faith that it is, to your point, you have to choose where you want to devote that attention. And it's not to say that you won't have, negative feelings on any topic. It's just to say that, like, I think that's normal, but where you choose to consciously spend your time will disproportionately affect your reality. You mentioned two things that are really important in there. One of them is journaling.
Yeah.
So finding ways to remove the things that are in your mind. There's lots of different positive techniques for journaling, but it does help to crystallize your thoughts. And then also practicing gratitude, which is like the golden lens in which we look through life. And there's been a lot of really fun studies done on gratitude that really show like how it can profoundly affect people. So I think those are great for anybody to maybe pick up, regardless of what they're facing. I guess the question I would have for you, for people that really identify with this particular issue themselves, is when you're saying to yourself, I am enough, do you feel like that removes some of the fuel for you to be like, how do I push for more? And not more for the sake of more, but just like, do you feel like by saying to yourself you're enough, that it removes some of that fuel for you to be ambitious and pursuing whatever your personal or professional endeavors are? Like, do you feel like it compromises that at all?
No, not at all. It's actually the opposite. When I push myself more, I'm closer to giving up because I don't have any energy anymore. Because I'm burning, the how do you say, something with a candle, the candle at both ends.
Yeah, burning the candle.
Yeah. So that there I have more chances to give up. And to be honest, a couple of years ago, I was at that point where I was pushing. And then I realized that I wake up in the morning and I feel like I don't love my job. I don't like my job anymore. And I was like, what? What's this? That's new. I've never felt like that. I always loved my job. And now I don't. So that was for me a wake-up call to say, hey, what you're doing, it doesn't make you more ambitious. It doesn't make you more in love with your job. Actually, it's the opposite. So when I take it slowly, even though it sounds like a paradox, when I take it slowly, and actually for perfectionists, the slowly is just a normal pace. So when I take it slowly, I have more chances to be in love, in connection with my work, have even more creativity, even more ideas. I can do more things. But it's the taking the break, being rested, but also learning realistic planning. What I said before removes the sense of urgency. I felt like I have to do everything today. I have to, start a podcast and a site and a YouTube channel and a book, everything in 1 year. While realizing that, you can do all this stuff, but it's not possible to do them in 1 year and not be admitted in a hospital. It's not possible.
Yeah. There's a question I asked our last guest, Freya Mortensen. She's an empath coach out of Canada, phenomenal lady. And it was just a spontaneous question. I'm going to ask you it as well. Do you believe that inner peace brings outer order, or that outer order brings inner peace?
Inner peace brings outer order. It starts from within. All the things that we are doing, the people we choose, the decisions we make are projections of what's happening inside us. So if inside us there's a chaos, probably we're creating another chaos outside.
Yeah.
So that's my perception.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting. I've asked that question to a lot of people, and I think there's some truth on both sides of however people choose to answer. But yeah, I mean, we don't unfortunately get the ability to control the outer world.
No.
But we do have the ability to control our inner world, which then does manifest the outer world in a lot of ways. So,
but also if you have inner peace, you can also cope with a world that is out of control.
Yeah.
Because you have the tools, because you don't need to control the outer world, because you don't need everything to be happy clappy. You don't need only rainbows and unicorns in order to be happy or in peace. When you created that inner peace, you can also manage whatever is coming from the outside.
Yeah, no, well said. And clearly with all that's going on in the world, we do not get the luxury of controlling it all. Are there any habits or mindsets that you feel are really important that you are trying to develop that are not, I guess, solidified yet for you?
Yes, this is what I'm working on now. I want to really wrap my head around the working out in the morning. I've always been a brain worker. So I'm using a lot my brain. And I had bad experiences again at school with the PE, physical education, and gymnastics, etc. So I've never been fond of working out, but I know also the power that this gives to our body, to our hormones, to our balance. So this is what I'm working now, trying to find the reason, the right moment, the right tools, the right motivation, or the right messages that I will say to myself in order to start working out in the morning.
Awesome. Is there anybody that you can think of that inspires you to the point where you would want to see their habits or mindsets?
Um, Not one specific. I'm generally very inspired by thought leaders and entrepreneurs, especially when I hear their story on how they started and how they ended up. Like when you hear poor people or people with zero stimuli, zero help, and they have done so many great
Yeah.
things. That's amazing. That's very inspiring for me. So I'm following some entrepreneurs and some motivational speakers. Dean Graziosi, that I said before, Amy Porterfield is very down to earth and yet so successful in the field of online courses. So I listen to her podcast not only to get some tips on how to do things, but also because I like her mindset. I like to pick up how she see things and how she deals with everyday normal struggles of entrepreneurs. Brené Brown, probably you know her already, yeah. She's so great, so passionate about what she's doing, and yeah, you just have to hear 5 minutes of her, and then you're already as soft as butter.
Yeah.
So I want to learn more about how they believed in themselves when everything was against them, against all odds. I want to learn their habits and well-being. I want to learn about how they create discipline, how they connect with their teams, and how they take risks. So that for me is what inspires me.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I draw a lot of inspiration from just hearing people's stories. It's interesting because when you mentioned Brene Brown, and I've read her book, I listened to her podcast, I've read a lot. She's phenomenal. But there's one quote in particular. Let's see if I have it on my wall here. Well, I pretty much memorized it at this point, but it really serves as the backbone for the standard, and it goes something to the effect of like, one day you will tell your story, and your story will be somebody else's survival guide.
Yes.
And it is that, because I think there are, although we can't copy people's habits and mindsets and routines, we do have to sort of trial and error it for ourselves. I am a big believer in the fact that, like, hey, there's 8 billion of us on this planet. The vast majority of us go through very similar situations, even the ones that we think we're alone on. And I know this is what you really stand for in your Loneliness Academy, Anti-Loneliness Academy, is that we're not alone. And the fact that, no matter what traumatic thing or has happened to you in your life, there are 8 billion human beings just alive today. Like, there are millions of people that have most likely gone through exactly what you're going through.
Yeah.
And I think if you can hear the way they describe it, especially those that have, found good coping mechanisms to deal with it, whatever that may be. One thing I am incredibly confident on is just the language that they use when they talk about those situations really cuts to the soul of somebody who's struggling with that. And I think that's powerful, because, I mean, and you do this for a living, is it just helps people realize that you're not alone. And I think no matter what we're facing with, it's divorce, it's domestic violence, it's depression, it's anxiety. I mean, pick a topic, for the love of God.
Yeah.
When you hear somebody else of like using very specific words of I've been there, like I know what that feels, and they'll use the words that only somebody in that situation would really resonate with. I do think it like uplifts a human and really opens up the door for them to think differently about their situation. So when you mentioned Brene Brown, I'm a big fan of her work, and I have that quote, I think, even on our website of like, for the love of God, everybody tell your story. It will help everybody.
What I like about Brene Brown, the quote that I keep in my head, is related also to the mindset that I spoke about before. She said in one of your interviews, if you're looking for evidence that you're not enough, you're going to find them. If you're looking for evidence that you're making mistakes or you're failing, you're going to find it as well. But this is not what we're doing here. We're not negotiating our worth. So
Yeah,
she said it all.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah.
Last question I got for you, and I think I know where you're going to go, but I want to hear you say it. When you think of all of the challenges we run into on this planet, and they're obviously very plentiful, is there any particular habit or mindset that you just wish you could wave a magic wand over and like instill it in every human being to the point that it would like nudge us all in a more loving and kind direction? Like what would that habit or mindset be from your perspective?
I think it's how we started this interview, talking about forgiveness and compassion. So what I would love to is for everybody to practice forgiveness, compassion, tolerance in mistakes. If we would be forgiving for our mistakes and for other people's mistakes, then we would be treating each other kinder. We would have better relationships because, of course, of compassion, but also we would be able to keep our habits. One reason that habits don't stick with us is because we're not forgiving ourselves every time they don't work. So if in your plan you have the goal to run 5Ks every day, for example, then one day you don't feel like running it, or one day it doesn't work, or one day you're feeling really weak and you don't manage the 5K, but you do the 2K. If you don't forgive yourself, you're not going to continue. You're not going to do it next day. You're going to be like, look at me, I'm a failure. Everybody does it, but I don't. But if you forgive yourself and you allow yourself to not be perfect, you're going to keep the chain. You're going to keep doing it every day, and you're going to grow immensely in that habit.
Yeah, beautiful. Well said.
Yeah.
Vassia, you're amazing. Like, I really, for quite some time, I've wanted to really like dig into your habits and mindsets. This has been wonderful. Is there anything you would want to leave the viewers, the guests with that maybe we haven't covered that you feel is important?
I think what I said before about tough love, we think that tough love makes us stronger or more successful, but actually it's the opposite. Being compassionate with ourselves really makes us stay in the game longer, because we're here for the long run. We're here for a marathon. We're not for a sprint here. So remind yourself sometimes when things go against whatever you have planned, instead of saying something like, it's a bad life, I'm a bad person, just focus on it's a bad day. It's not a bad life. It's a bad day. And we're here and we are not doing anything wrong. As you said before, 8 billion people experience the same thing that I'm experiencing. It's a bad day, not a bad life, not a bad person.
Yeah, beautiful. If people want to learn more about you, we're going to include a plethora of information in the show notes, but where should they go?
AntiLoneliness.com is the site that includes all this information. It's my blog there. It's information that they can find about my courses that I create, especially for people that they would like to change their mindset and to sift from the toxic perfectionist to the healthy one. People who want to work on their fears, fear of failure, silence their inner critical voice. It's all there. Also, I'm sharing with you I shared with you the link of this book, the 5-minute gratitude journal.
Oh, awesome.
Because that's what I use every day. It's a fantastic book because every day they have different prompts. You don't need to think only one question. Yeah. What do you want to feel thankful for? It's more questions there, and it really makes it more interesting to practice gratitude. And my YouTube channel that I create videos every week, and I'm talking about different aspects of mental health, perfectionism, relationship, boundaries, acceptance, compassion. It's all there.
Yeah, you've got literally like something for everybody. So at least when I look at it, and your Instagram account is great. I watch so many of your videos. That's awesome. Well, Vassia, I really appreciate your time today. You are amazing. I look forward to continually following you. And yeah, just thank you for sharing a little bit more about who you are.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I really enjoyed our interview.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Standard. Before we go, click on the link in the show notes of this episode to learn more about today's guest. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody who you think would benefit from it as well.